Hello YouTube, welcome back to another reaction video. Today I'll be reacting to World War One Oversimplified Part 2. After watching the Part 1, I was really eager to watch the Part 2, so I'm really looking forward to it. I actually realized that I didn't really know anything about World War One. Something I thought I knew. I thought I knew some things, but I literally did not know anything, which made me kind of feel embarrassed about the whole thing. So guys, as you can see, I'm trying to learn more about the world, trying to learn the history and everything that things that happened before our existence. And I would like you guys to join me on this journey by subscribing to the channel and smashing the like button and hitting the notification bell to get new content. Now let's get into the video.
With both sides stuck in a hard stalemate, they knew this war wasn't going to be about taking territory, but about simply wearing each other down. The Allies had plenty of men to expend from its overseas dominions, and the British also started a naval blockade, so Germany couldn't import stuff, like food. Neither side really wanted a long, grueling war though, so they both thought of ways to break the deadlock on the Western Front. Idea number one, new frontiers. When the war first broke out, Australia was quick to take German New Guinea. The Allies also quickly jumped on Germany's colonies in Africa, and particularly in German East Africa, locals were enlisted as soldiers and carriers by both sides, leading to a tragic loss of life for the native Africans.
That's crazy.
Some new combatants entered the war as well. The Allies knew
I had no idea about this. Like, were Africans involved in World War One? That's crazy. That means the colonies, like the countries which is the British, the French, and the rest of them that colonized African countries. So they came to Africa to get soldiers. That's crazy, man. I had no idea.
were Italy and Japan. Japan was busy building itself an empire, so it was more than happy to take away German islands and colonies in East Asia. Italy actually had an alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary before the war, but after some tense relations, and then the Allies promising to give them some of Austria-Hungary's stuff, they switched sides. Italy opened up a front in the mountains here, but like everyone else, they were stuck in stalemate for most of the war. The Central Powers' new friend was a struggling empire in the Middle East. The Ottomans were divided on whether to actually join the war or not, since they had been exhausted by the recent Balkan Wars. Some of the politicians who did want to join went off on their own and fired some shells at Russia, and then came back and said, "Whoops, looks like we're at war now." The Ottoman entry into the war was of particular concern to the British.
This guy is
since
funny,
the Middle
I
East
swear.
was full of oil, and Britain wanted all of that oil. First, the Ottomans tried to attack Russia in the Caucasus Mountains, but they weren't prepared for the cold, and many of them froze to death.
Damn.
Then they crossed miles of desert to take the Suez Canal from the British, but that failed too. Then the Allies tried to take the Dardanelles at Gallipoli in a long and hard trench warfare campaign, but that also failed. The Ottomans blamed their initial losses on the ethnic Armenians living within Ottoman territory, and the resulting Armenian genocide led to the deaths of 1.5 million people. Then the Germans sent spies into Afghanistan to try to convince the Arab tribes there to rise up in jihad against the British and attack India. But that plan failed, partly because the spies got bored, brewed their own alcohol, and got drunk, which is a bad thing to do in Afghanistan. All these new frontiers
the
hadn't
hell?
done much to change the war. Aware that the Allies had more men and supplies than them, the Germans knew they had to do something to break the stalemate. Before the war, there was a big conference that set out the rules of modern warfare. No chemical weapons, no killing civilians. Basically, don't be jerks. The Germans held a meeting and decided to be jerks. Zeppelin air raids commenced over British cities. They also started attacking the Allied trenches with chlorine gas, and they used submarines to sink civilian ships. One such civilian ship was the Lusitania, which had 159 Americans on board when it was sunk. Further swindling
I guess that was
against
what
the Germans.
made US to join.
Not to be completely unfair to the Germans, the Allies also engaged in chemical warfare soon after, and they had been hiding anti-submarine weapons on their civilian ships, which let the Germans justify their attacks. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary still hadn't dealt with Serbia, so the Central Powers enlisted some help. Bulgaria wished it was bigger and was still bitter about losing the Second Balkan War. The Central Powers promised to make all of Bulgaria's wildest dreams come true if they helped, so they signed on, and together they knocked out Serbia. The Serbian troops retreated through Albania, which was neutral but had some ties to Austria-Hungary. So Austria-Hungary entered Albania in a friendly invasion to chase down the Serbians, many of whom escaped by sea. It's 1916, and a lot is happening. as if they didn't have enough enemies already.
Man, war is crazy. I mean, and all these things, it's not just happening in days. This is happening in months. These are monthly occurrences. Like, man, you could just be in a particular spot for weeks. Terrible spots, not rosy spots. Terrible spots for weeks. It's crazy, man. Sometimes I'm just so thankful that I'm born in this era. I mean, because I'm pretty sure if I was born in this particular era, I would have had to fight one of these wars, because there were so many wars all over the place in those days, which is just crazy, man.
Already, Germany added one more to the list. Portugal had been getting a bit chummy with the Allies behind the scenes, and Germany didn't like that one bit. Around the same time, the only sea battle of the war happened. Both sides had a new powerful class of battleships called dreadnoughts, but they were so expensive to build that neither side wanted to risk losing them in a battle, so they kept them in port, except for one time when they had a big fight and a bunch of them got damaged, so they didn't try that again. The UK started conscripting men to the army, so they had plenty of reserves, which is just as well because the Western Front was about to get brutal. The longest and one of the bloodiest battles of the war started when the Germans launched an attack around the French city of Verdun. The French defended it desperately, leading to hundreds of thousands of casualties.
Damn.
Under pressure, the French called on its allies to do something to draw the Germans' attention away, so the British started their own long and brutal fight, the Battle of the Somme, with 60,000 British casualties on just the first day.
What the
It was
hell?
also here that the British first used one crazy brand new piece of sci-fi technology. The Russians had been getting pushed back further and
Wait,
further into their own territory.
wait. The sci-fi technology is tanks. Oh, that is crazy. I mean, okay, that means at that point, tanks were like, the new thing, like the new innovation. That's crazy. I mean, like, okay. I mean, that is. When you watch things like this, it makes you appreciate how far human beings have come. Seriously, like, look at it. Well, tanks were like sci-fi. It's crazy. I'm sure that there are things that have not been invented yet, that have not been made yet, that people like us now that are existing right now. In the next maybe 100 years, people will be looking at the artillery that we have now as what? Like child's play. I mean, dude, it's crazy, seriously.
But in response to the French call for help, they began a huge offensive, and did really well until they ran out of supplies and got stuck. Seeing how well the Russians had been doing, Romania decided now would be a great time to jump in and win the war. And then they got pounded. The Greeks were fighting amongst themselves about whether to join the war or not. The king liked the Central Powers, while the Prime Minister wanted to join the Allies. After a brief national schism, during which the country split into two, the king finally abdicated and the country reunited. With Allied help, they began a new offensive. In the Middle East, Russia was pushing into Ottoman territory from the north. The British had also made a landing in Mesopotamia to protect Persia's oil fields.
This Ottoman Empire, that is the present-day Turkey, right? Present-day Turkey, because that looks like Turkey, the Turkey-shaped map, from what I'm looking at, I think.
And they had also sent a small army up the Tigris River to try to take Baghdad,
Oh.
but the army got sieged in the town of Kut along the way,
But
and eventually
Baghdad was part
surrendered.
of the
A
Ottoman
new offensive was
Empire.
launched from the south with all-out desert warfare. The offensive was aided by one famous British officer, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, who helped lead the Arab tribes in a revolt that wreaked havoc on the Ottoman supply lines. By the time 1917 rolled around, everyone was exhausted. There were mutinies in the French army, the German populace was starving, and the war had drained all of Russia's supplies. There was no clear winner, and it was still anyone's war. The only question now was, who was going to break first? And the answer was Russia. Tired of not eating, and mad that a crazy magic homeless guy was calling some of the shots, there was an uprising in Petrograd complete with riots and strikes. The riots turned into a full-scale revolution, and a new government overthrew the Tsar. Then a few months later, the Bolsheviks overthrew the new government, and they pulled Russia out of the war. This was great news for Germany, who now only had to focus on the Western Front. But there was still one problem. The pesky United States of America was looking increasingly like it was going to join the war. America had been selling supplies to the Allies throughout the war and was getting super rich off the back of it, meaning it was in fantastic shape and was dangerous to the Germans. So Germany sent a telegram to Mexico saying, "Wouldn't it be crazy cool if you guys attacked America?" But the British intercepted the message, showed it to the Americans, and that was the final straw. American troops began shipping out to Europe. This was terrible news for Germany, and they knew their only hope now was to force France and the UK to surrender before the fresh American troops arrived. It was now or never, so they started one final attack. They converged their troops and hit hard at the Somme and pushed the Allies back. They hit a second time further north, then again and again. With each hit, the Germans were spending more and more resources, while the Allies were getting better and better at repelling their attacks. By the fifth punch, the Allies held the line and even pushed back. With American troops now arriving in larger numbers, the Allies launched a counterattack, and that was it. The Central Powers were being pushed back on all fronts. Bulgaria collapsed first, followed by the Ottoman Empire, then Austria-Hungary, and finally on November 11th, 1918 at 11 o'clock, Germany surrendered. At the peace treaty, Germany was forced to reduce its military, accept war guilt, and pay the bill for the war. After indescribable suffering and millions died, the world learnt its lesson and never had such an awful war again. For about 20 years.
Alright guys, this guy's videos are always very funny. I always have so much fun with it. I don't know, the Germans, I get why they are so tolerant these days, because in the past these guys were brutal, seriously. I mean, so basically they lost World War I and World War II. That's what it means. They lost both wars, and you could look at them like, okay, they're losing, but you have to understand that just one country going against several countries. So I'm not trying to give them kudos or anything, but I mean, like, this World War I, like, the way the war started, it makes no sense. Like, it's not something that people should be fighting about. Just because something happened, the Germans say, okay, start fighting, I will join you. I mean, it just doesn't, I don't know, man. And I read somewhere that the Germans, like, even especially after World War II, that they have not been allowed to be invest in their military. Is that true? Like, any of you guys that know that for a fact, can you enlighten me? Like, is it because it's almost like everybody is scared of Germany beefing up their military again because of their past? And because I actually did not know, I actually did not even really, like, ultimately what this video have shown me is that I really didn't know anything about World War I, because I didn't even know that it was Germany, and Germany were like the antagonists, quote unquote. I didn't know. I didn't know anything, period. World War II is more popular. Most people know about World War II because of Hitler. So I knew that Germany were Germany and Japan were the antagonists. But World War I basically had no idea about anything. And I'm glad that I got to learn something today. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the reaction, and my next videos will be about World War II, obviously. Smash the like button on your way out, and I'll see you next time. Peace.